My other chair broke and I have to use one of the kids' chairs and it's so tiny. Good morning, guys, and welcome back to the garden. I was spreading grass seed, of all things, this morning, and I got to thinking about how many times I have changed course or completely stopped my course over the last 4 years of owning this homestead. And then I got to thinking about how amazing it is that I'm still here doing this and still growing in my homestead every day, every year. I mean, I am providing maybe 70% of our vegetables and foods, like garden vegetables for the year, 100% of our own meat chickens, 100% of our own eggs, and it's just been an absolutely amazing journey. And it definitely could have gone wrong along the way. So I was thinking about what made it go right for me, and I wanted to give you guys like 5-ish tips on how to make homesteading sustainable in the long run for you, and not just a flash in the pan hobby or fad that you decide to try out and give up because it's too hard, you don't have time, or it's just too much. So I'm going to be watering the garden while we do this because sometimes I really like to water the garden by hand. It's very quiet and beautiful. And we will discuss these tips on how to keep doing this for the long term. So last week I decided to take down the poultry netting, the electric poultry netting that we have. I honestly don't remember which brand it is, but we've had it since the second year we've had chickens here on this property. And when I first got this property in 2020, I had already been researching homesteading for probably about a year. So I was starting my plan, deciding what I wanted, and then this property finally opened up. It was an 1.5 acres. I was so excited. And I had been watching tons of YouTube videos. At the time, there weren't like just a whole lot of books. That's when the homesteading boom was really becoming popular. And everyone online had these movable chicken tractors and these electric poultry nettings for predators and such, and keeping the chickens in. And it was just all a great idea. And I was like hopping on the bandwagon. So I bought a very expensive poultry netting. A chicken tractor was made by Chase, which I still use and is awesome. But I didn't really think about, and at the time I didn't know, so to be fair, but I didn't really think about what would work for me on my property. And over the years, I've had 2 coyote attacks that have decimated my entire flock. No attacks from other predators like skunks, which we do have in the area, or, I mean, I think that's the only other really big predator besides loose dogs that we have. So I didn't really need it for predator protection. I didn't know that, but I definitely could have gone a cheaper route than buying a several $100 poultry netting fence, an energizer, because a coyote can clear my 5-foot perimeter fences. They don't have any problem with the electric netting, and my chickens are in a completely enclosed coop raised above off the ground. So it's just something that I didn't think about before, and I just kind of let everyone tell me what to do without maybe even going a slightly cheaper route first, you know, putting up a chicken netting fence with some T-posts, or just doing something a little bit less pricey and involved, laborious than that. And so my first point being, I think it's really easy when you're just getting started, or even if you're not just getting started, but you just like researching and watching this stuff online or reading a lot of books, to just follow along with what everyone else is doing and let that kind of dictate how you're going to do your homestead. And that can get really expensive really quickly because everyone is trying to sell you something online. And it can just be overwhelming, especially nowadays, especially if you're trying to get started nowadays with this big boom of homesteading and gardening, YouTube channels and blogs and all this stuff that has just really taken off over the last couple years. There is so much information online everywhere. It's amazing. It's great. You don't have to find a farmer in your small town to learn from for years on end to be able to have a homestead. You can just do it yourself, and that is awesome. But it can also be really, really extremely overwhelming, and it can make you stop before you even start, because there's just so much so much information online. There are hundreds of styles of chicken coops that you can find online now, and it just doesn't have to be that complicated. So to go back to the chicken fence, I just took it down because we weren't using it. I mean, my chickens free range this property all day long. They're completely safe. I have 3 dogs, and the fence just gets in the way. I have to climb over it every time I want to clean the coop. It stays open all the time, and it was kind of an eyesore, honestly. It just kind of looked kind of trashy the way that I had it set up. So we took it down, and everything's completely fine. And I'm even thinking now that maybe I'll be moving the chicken coop around the property. I haven't really put too much thought into it yet, but it's got wheels on it, so might as well if I'm not going to keep them penned up. And I think the first lesson is just that you don't have to do something that you see online. You don't have to follow a specific rule book. I mean, you can if that makes it easier for you. But if that actually stresses you out, you don't have to do it. You can do whatever you want. I always encourage you on this channel to just experiment. I am constantly experimenting in the garden and on my property, because you're going to have to find what works for you. Not everyone's way is your way, and vice versa. So don't stress yourself out about doing something exactly the way someone else said to do it. There are some portions of my garden I have to water by hand regularly. It's going to be all of the bean trellises down the middle row of my garden where I don't have drip irrigation set up. And then sometimes I just come through once a week or once every couple weeks and like get a good soaking in on these beds, because I do live in the desert and it's hot and dry all the time. We haven't even had rain this year yet. And I have a drip system, so I only get water going to where the plant's roots are, but that can mean that the rest of the soil in your bed becomes hydrophobic. So I do just like to come through here once in a while, give everything a good spray down to make sure that the entire soil microbiome stays alive and healthy, instead of just where these plants are growing. So about 2 years after I bought this property, I'd already started the garden, I had a couple beds in, I decided to quit my career in law enforcement. And over the next year or so, it was a big cultural and life change for me. I kind of went through some rough stuff, like just mentally and figuring myself out. And it became really easy for a short period of time. It became really easy for me to get overwhelmed. And one thing about me is that I'm super, super frugal, like cheap. I prefer to spend as little money as possible. I'd rather figure out a way to do it myself kind of person. So that really capped me out every year on how much I was able to expand the garden. And I'm going to tie these 2 points in together in a second. But I built this garden a couple beds a year over the last 4. It was actually pretty slow progress compared to what I could have done if I just wasn't cheap. But tying that back into what I was going through for a little while, in the middle of building this garden up, I don't think I would have been able to handle the harvest and the growing and the overwhelm if I hadn't grown this garden slowly. I think I would have given up. I would have thrown my hands in. I would have just shut down. I think that moving slowly and building this homestead slowly over the course of 4 years is what has made me able to continue to do it. And I'll add a caveat that I believe the amount of overwhelm you feel is absolutely tied to your goal, your why for doing this homestead. If you're just having a garden and you enjoy growing whatever, and whatever you harvest is fine, and you give a lot of it away to your friends, and if your attitude about it is this, that you're just having fun and you don't mind what comes out, then yeah, of course it can absolutely be stress-free. But I am a stress-prone person, a little bit neurotic, and I really, really, really want to grow as much food as possible. So not growing food or having failures or not being able to harvest it properly and put it away properly stresses me out. So absolutely, if I had not slowed down and become accustomed to a larger and larger harvest every year, realizing the work that it takes, the time, oh my gosh, so much time that it takes to not just grow and harvest your food, but preserve it so that it can continue to feed you over, the season to the season. It's a lot of work. And if you just throw in a huge garden all at once and get a bunch of chickens and you have dozens of eggs and pounds of produce, that can be extremely overwhelming if you've never dipped your toe in the water. And it is extremely tempting to get this dream in your head and just want to get it all done right now and just dive head first. And people have done it and they've been successful, but it can be really stressful, and a lot of people have done it and then quit. A lot of people get started, get all the animals, plant the biggest garden, and then they just burn out. Don't do that. Go slow. Even if your reason for going slow is that you don't want to spend the money on things, that's great. That's a good motivator. Being cheap is an excellent motivator. But take it slow. There's no rush. Which kind of leads me into my third point, is jumping head first into this because you are coming from a place of fear or stress, or you just need to get it done now because the world's ending. Don't do that. And I think this really only applies to people who are wanting homesteading to be a lifestyle. But I'm sure most of you that are watching this, unless you're just here for the gardening content, which I welcome you, are wanting this to be a lifestyle, something you carry on for eternity. And, you want it to be happy and romantic and peaceful and nutritious and just an overall benefit to your life. But if you want it to be that way, it can't be a stress-filled sprint to the finish. I believe that in most cases, things worth having don't come free or easy. And you really can't cheat nature. I mean, sure, you could hire someone to build you a garden, but you've got to take care of the plants, and that means you have to learn how to garden. It's not something you're innately born with. It is a skill like everything else that you have to learn. You have to learn how to take care of animals. Animals get sick. They're living beings. You have to figure out what's wrong with them, know how to treat them, know how to take care of them, raise them right, butcher them properly. It's just all a learning experience that really can't be rushed and can't be, stamped into your mind. Suddenly you know how to do this. It takes time and good and bad experiences to know how to do this. And I think that when people try and rush into gardening or homesteading for whatever reason or the next, we're not going to get into politics or beliefs or anything like that, but from a place of stress or fear or something like that, I just don't think it ends up working out well. I've never seen it work out well. I've never heard of it. People burn out very quickly, and it's just not sustainable to do something from a negative place. You want to do it from a positive place because it needs to be enjoyable for it to be sustainable. Yeah. I have tons of tomatoes on this Estiva plant, as well as on the Isis candy cherry, but none of them have started to ripen yet. Oh, and I've got these Romas too. I'm excited to try these. This is a new variety for me. And not everyone's immune to, stressing and wanting more quickly as possible. I have been, I've gone through that as well because I want to expand this farm a bit. So these past 2 years, I've been trying to think of how we can raise more food, other than expanding the garden, which I do every year. But I'm talking in the way of meat, because we are primarily like a meat and veggie family, and rice. We like a lot of rice, but we don't eat a whole lot of pasta or dairy drinks or anything like that, except when the kids are over. So really the only thing I've ever thought about that we could have here is either pork, so we could raise our own pigs for meat, or I could get dairy goats. Because we can't have cattle on an acre and a half, nor do I think I would want to raise my own cattle, because it would be primarily feeding them hay, which would be pricey to begin with. But if I wanted to try and find organic hay, it would, oh goodness. So it's just not feasible for us to have a dairy cow or meat cattle here on this property. Pigs, goats, next best thing. And there have been several times I've just wanted to jump straight into it. I've told Chase, you know what, I'm not going to make this decision. We just need to pull the trigger and jump into it, because that's the only way that it's going to happen. And one of the things that has helped me not do some sort of knee-jerk decision like that is making this homestead a democracy and not a dictatorship. Which I hope is not a new concept to a lot of you. I hope that your home, if you live with more than yourself, is not a dictatorship. But just to explain a little bit further, Chase doesn't really do the homestead stuff. He's not totally disinterested in it, but it's not his passion, it's mine. And that is totally fine. He has his own passions and I support him. And if I need his help, he will absolutely help me. But I enjoy providing the food for myself and the family, good, healthy food, and this is something that makes me happy in my soul. So I'll do it alone. That's totally fine. But that doesn't mean I get to make all the decisions alone, because it absolutely affects this household if I'm gonna be here 6 months out of the year having to milk a goat once a day, every morning. Because Chase likes to take trips and vacations, and we like to go camping. And there are things that would be affected in our life and the kids' life if I just make a decision for myself. So I had gone through pros and cons. I even made like a little list on a piece of paper about pigs versus goats, and you know, which one will be better, which one will be worse. And I just couldn't figure it out. I really, really wanted to move forward with something. I felt like I was stagnant here with just the eggs and the chicken and the garden, even though I have enough to be thankful for. So you just open up the floor to the family, and I had a long discussion with Chase about it and pros and cons. He really liked the idea of pigs. I don't eat a lot of pork. So I really liked the idea of goats so that I could make soaps and lotions and stuff. And we never really came to a consensus, which may not be the answer you're looking for, but this happened like almost a year ago. And just putting it off has been an overall positive choice in our lives right now. Chase got an RV, and we have just been taking trips and going camping more, and it's been really enjoyable. We've done more trips in these past few months than we have previously in the last couple years. So it's just been really, really enjoyable to be able to have this freedom to go on camping trips whenever we want. And I'm not sure what would have happened if I had had my way and just, you know, I'd already been talking on Facebook to people about Nigerian dwarf goats. And I'll be honest, I'm not any clearer on what we should do. I don't know if we should do pork or do dairy goats or do anything at all, really. But it has absolutely been beneficial getting input from more than one person on what this homestead needs, what we can do, what we can feasibly do, you know? Chase may have to do some of the work for the pigs or the goats sometimes. I can't see him sitting down and milking a good Nigerian dwarf goat. Maybe one day. That would be cool. So it kind of seems like a silly tip to to ask other people their opinions, especially your significant other. But I'm sure there's someone out there that needs that advice, unfortunately. And I've got one more tip for you guys, and that is to save your new projects or hobbies, especially if you're a serial homestead hobbyist, for the slow times. Normally, that means the winter time. So I've wanted to start tons of new projects and learn a ton of new things over the last few years. And I always save them for the winter because once summer starts kicking in here, I am doing pest management, squash bug management, harvesting, preserving, all the ways of preserving, and it is just a ton of work. Not only to mention I have YouTube to work with, I have a part-time job that I do a couple days a week, so I have that. It's just a lot of things to do and zero time for me to deep dive into a new hobby like soap making, which I really want to do. So what I've done the past few years is I've saved all my new little fun projects for the winter. Last year I did a lot of learning about different kinds of fermentation. I have since made several batches of kombucha, which is going really well. It's very fun, easy, I love it. I've made a ginger bug, which was neat, but not something I'm interested in doing long term. And I have tons of other goals. I really do want to learn soap making, genuinely. That would be super cool. I also want to learn how to crochet and knit, which for me as a learning person, like I really have to, and this may not be everyone's issue, it's my issue, I have an issue. I have to deep dive into something before I start it. Like if I'm gonna learn how to crochet, I want to read at least 3 different books on how to do it, watch a million videos. And all of this learning has to be done before I even pick up a needle. I'm not the kind of person to just jump into something because I get way too frustrated if I have it wrong. So I'd rather just do it right the first time. That requires a lot of time. That's something that I don't have any time for during the summer months to dedicate. So I'm gonna save knitting and soap making for the winter when I have nothing to do in the garden. We're not growing any meat birds, we're barely getting any eggs, and it's just a very chill time. So, on that note, if you're starting out, I just recommend, besides the stuff you have to get done during the busy part of the year, like growing a garden or, whatever livestock stuff you've got going on in the spring and summer, that of course has to be done. But all your little hobbies and projects that don't need to be done right now, save them for when you're not busy. Don't overwhelm yourself. You're gonna either do a poor job on them, you're gonna get them done but be miserable about it, and it's just gonna stress you out. If it's not needed, save it for a later date. There is always time to learn how to make soap. You can do it later. So that's about it. That's all I could think of in a short period of time. I was just thinking of quick tips that have helped make this sustainable for me, especially as like a one-woman show. Like I said, this isn't really Chase's jam. I do all of the food preservation, growing, harvesting, and it's fun for me. I enjoy it. I'm not mad about it at all. But I don't think I would be here today if the previous 5 tips I just gave you hadn't, if I hadn't done them. Because I would have just been way too overwhelmed while still learning what I was doing while I was overwhelmed doing it. It would have been a mess. So I'm just very glad that this entire process has gone slow enough, whether it was on accident or on purpose, for me to just become accustomed to the work and the abundance of food and handling it, and I really feel like I'm just moving at a great pace right now. We're growing a ton of our own food, and I could still grow more on this land. And I'm in no rush right now in this period of my life. I am very content with where I'm at and the decisions that I've made thus far. And I wanted to share that with you guys. I don't want to see any more people on YouTube getting burnt out of homesteading, because it's awesome and it's fun and it can be very fulfilling and rewarding. So thank you guys for joining me today. I will have another garden tour, maybe. I see it every day. I don't know if anything's changed since the last time I showed you guys, so I don't want to bore you. But I should have another garden tour coming up soon. I pulled out a couple plants, tomato included. It wasn't doing so well. and we're praying that I won't have a complete curly top virus decimation of my tomatoes this year. It's looking good so far. Knock on wood. But if you guys have any more tips for new or upcoming homesteaders, please leave them down in the comments below. Let's help our community out, and I will catch you on the next one.